guys, it's Vishnu here from Kalash. Very good morning to all of you. And in this video, we're going to go through a few examples of how the position on the chessboard, how the position of the pieces on the chessboard affects the relative strength of the pieces. So I hope you recall in the previous video we covered, the relative strength of chess pieces, and I clearly mentioned, the blunders that the beginners are making, such as their hesitation to make sacrificing major pieces for a smaller piece or of pieces of smaller value. So let's take a look at. I theoretically and practically explained it in the previous video, but I didn't give you any particular example so that you can understand it with much more clarity. So in this video, we are going to look through a few examples and get convinced that what is actually the right way to uh, look at this particular concept. So here you can see that white king is on g5, the black queen is on g1, and black has a pawn which is about to queen on d2, and a king is supporting the black pawn on d2. So what do you think, guys? Can white win this position? It is true that white can win this position, but it cannot win it so easily. So this is one example which I particularly chose in order to understand that in the end game, even a pawn can be really threatening to the queen. So even though white is ultimately winning this, but it clearly shows that black can create some problems even with one passed pawn in his hand. So it is not so easy to win. It will take a couple of moves for white to win this game. So let's first we have to you know how do you win this position? Because if you keep a check, say on g2 equals to e1, if you go to e4 to f1, and if you come to d3 check, come against to e1. So how do you win this position? The idea is to push this king to the d1 square, and you can once you by giving checks, you use the king, you use the queen to give checks to the king and force him to go to the d1 square. Once that happens, we move our king closer to this pawn and snatch this pawn with the help of our queen. So that is the main idea in this game, in this puzzle which I have chosen. So let's take a look at this. Queen g2 check, king e1. Queen e4 check, king moves to f2. Again queen d3, because you want to threatening to snatch the pawn on the next move and also preventing it from queening. So king comes to e1, queen e3 check. Now queen e3 check, because now if the king moves to f1, you can simply snatch the pawn on d2. So now the king is forced to go to d1. Now we have a time. You can also say that white gained a tempo. What do you mean by a tempo? Tempo is nothing but gaining time. Time means a move in chess. You are gaining an extra move by forcing the black king to uh, obstruct the pawn. So you gain a move in the sense. Um, what can I say? See, it's like it's particularly useful in the opening where you say you gain a move because maybe the opponent has moved the same piece twice, which thereby gives you an advantage over your opponent by helping you develop more pieces in less time. So that's what you mean by a tempo. So it applies in endgame too. Now white has moved his king twice, and he's forced to move his king twice, and at the same time obstructing his own pawn. So we use this time to move our king forward. So king f4. Now king goes to c2. Queen e2. This is called pinning the pawn against the king. It's a tactic. This is the pawn. This is the king. This is the white queen. And the pawn cannot be pushed forward because it isn't a pin. So after king c1, queen c4 check, king b2, queen d3, king c1, again queen c3 check. Similar idea which we played on queen e3 check. Now if the king goes to b1, you can simply snatch this pawn. But the king won't go to b1 because it's want to hold on as much as it can. So it moves to king d1. Now we take this time to again bring our king forward. King e3. Now the only move black has got is king e1. So queen takes d2, king f1, and queen f2 is checkmate. So in this way, in a queen and versus pawn end game, if you are up against a pawn, a pass pawn like this, then you can use this technique to win the end game. So let's take a look at the second example. Here, what do you think, guys? What will be the result? Can White win this game, or it's going to be a draw? Pause the video and take 5 to 15 seconds of your time, and please post your answers as comments in the video. Okay, so time up. So the answer is White cannot win this game because I'll show you through this example. Let's play through the moves. Queen g4 check, King h1. Now, if White moves his White king, it would be a stalemate because Black doesn't have anywhere to go. He cannot move his pawn. He cannot move his king also. So that is not possible. You cannot move the king forward like you did in the other example in order to capture this pawn because it is on the edge of the board and you have prevented the king from any entry, and also the pawn cannot move, so it's a clear case of stalemate. I hope you recall what is a stalemate. We covered in our early video lessons. If not, you can please refer to my previous videos and then learn what is a checkmate, what is the difference between a checkmate, check, and a stalemate. So king g1, after king h1, queen f3 check, king g1, queen g3 check. Now, if you move to king f1, it would be a clear blunder because White can simply snatch this pawn and then win the game. So make sure that you don't, make such a blunders if you get a similar position. Queen f3 check, king g1, queen g3 check, king h1, queen e1 check, king g2, queen e2 check. Now there is a small trick, guys. Say that you are, it's a very small trick. It's a very tiny trick. So say that you're playing a blitz or a bullet game, and if you have less time, and suddenly people will move back to h1, what happens is you immediately get checkmated because of queen f1 check. So make sure you don't miss this move. So you're not supposed to go to h1 here. You're supposed to come down to g1. So queen e1 check, king g2, queen e2 check. And if you go to king g3 also, it is still a blunder because after queen g3, White can get hold of this h1 square, the controlling queen square, by playing queen to f1. And no matter what Black plays, king h4 or king g4, you can simply come to h1 and then win this pawn by bringing the king forward. So don't make those two mistakes. Neither move your king to g3 nor go to h1. Simply come down to g1. So here also it makes it very clear that instead of being a full queen up against a pawn, it's 9 points against 1 point. Still, White is not able to win the game. So these are some examples which I want to bring forward because I want to remove this misconception clearly from the minds of children and other beginners who feel that materially if you are superior you can win the game. Not at all. Because that's not the case in chess. Everything depends upon the position on the chessboard. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of more examples. What do you think will happen in this position? Earlier, it was the h pawn. Earlier, it was the h pawn, and you could hide in front of the pawn. And also, if White plays queen g4 check or something like that, you can go to h pawn and you can hide yourself, and it would be stalemate. Now, what will happen in this case? Can White win this game, or it's going to be a draw? Feel free to pause the video and take your time and let me know the answers as comments. Okay, guys, time up. So also, this is also going to be a draw. It's a bishop pawn and a h pawn are more drawing tendencies in the endgame because of stalemating tricks that Black can make against the white king and the queen, against the white queen here. So, say if it's, let me turn on the notation window. Queen g4 check, king h2, queen f3 check, king g1, queen g3 check, king h1. So this is the stalemating trick. If you capture on f2, it is a stalemate. And if you bring your king forward, say e6 or f6, you can simply queen. black will simply queen and it's equal. It's a draw. You cannot win this game. Okay, so I hope you understood this example. Let's take a look at another couple of more examples. So here you are playing against a rook, and normally queen against rook, usually the one with the player with the queen wins the game. So here, how is it won? Let's take a look at this example. So first, you have to play queen e5 check, king h1, queen a1 check, king h2, queen e1 check. Now the idea behind this is we reach the same position as we were three moves back, because the idea was to create a maneuvering, to create a zugzwang for your opponent. Zugzwang means it's a situation where it's a position where you can't make any improvement, and whoever who plays the move, uh, loses the game. Whoever whose move it is will lose the game. This is not exactly a zugzwang because white cannot lose the game, but it is kind of, because um, here you can also call it more um, more precisely, it should be called as a three-move maneuvering. Maneuvering means the movement of pieces over through different squares and reach a specific square which you have in your mind. So the movement of the pieces is called as maneuvering. So here the queen was on e5, queen moved to e5 check, king h1, queen a1 check, king h2, queen e1 check. So these were the squares you used to maneuver the king. Sorry, to maneuver the queen. And you use the same position again now, but only difference is that now it's black's turn to move. So when black moved his rook to g8, white won the game in the next couple of moves by winning the rook by giving checks to his king. Queen e5 check, king g1, queen a1 check, king h2, queen a2 check, king h1, and queen takes g8, king h2, and queen g2 mate. So maneuvering means moving your pieces through different squares in order to reach a better square. Maybe it is also a commonly used technique in order to win the game. You are trying to move your piece from badly placed squares into more powerful and more power more into a square that gives you more influence over the chessboard. Okay, now let's take a look at this example. In the previous example, you could see that queen versus rook won the game, but in this example, I'm going to show you that how the position is drawn, even if when you have the queen versus a rook uh, game. Now here, the black draws the game by simply giving checks, perpetual checks. Perpetual check means continuously giving checks and your opponent is unable to escape from those checks. He's not able to he cannot able to shield himself from the checks given by his opponent. He cannot obstruct the check, neither capture the check nor move away from the check. So here, rook h7 check, king g1, rook g7 check, king f1, rook f7 check. Now if you move to king e1, you can simply pin the queen, and queen takes e7, king takes e7. Once again, both of them have no pieces or pawns left, and it's a dead draw. So if the king moves to g1, once again you play rook g1 check, king h1, rook h7 check, and there is no end to this. Now you might be thinking, what if he climbs up the ladder like this? After rook h7 check, he plays king g2, rook g7 check, king h3, rook h7 check, king g4, rook g7 check, king h5, rook h7 check, king g6. Now pause the video and tell me what's a drawing move. You have found it, that's great. So it is rook to g7 check, king f6, and rook g6 check. Now this is called a skewer. This technique is called a skewer, where you are checking the king and a major piece is hiding behind the king. So when the king moves, You can simply capture the queen and it will once again become a draw. But what if the king captures the rook? What would happen? Once again, it is a stalemate, guys. The king cannot move anywhere. The black king cannot move anywhere. It's black's turn to play, and it is a dead draw. Now, let's take a look at one more variation. Yeah. What if after you played rook g7 check and white played king f6, and that's why you are able to play rook g6 check and king g6. What happens if white plays king to h6? It's still take it's still the same, guys. You can still play rook h7 check. If king takes h7, once again it is stalemate. And if he moves to g7, you can give a check here. And if he comes to f6, once again rook g6 check. And this draws the game. Black saves himself. This is another very simple example which I want to bring forward in order to understand how a pass pawn can be very menacing. I already pointed this out in the previous video where I said a pass pawn can be really menacing for a rook. Here it's a very simple example. It's a very simple example to understand how a rook cannot win over a pawn. Now here you can see that the pawn is about the white pawn. The white pawn is about to queen on the next move. Black has a rook and a king, but it's still not able to prevent this pawn from queening. If he goes to g8, you can simply capture it. If he comes to f1, you can capture it with a king. So what black does is he keeps a check on, he has a check in his hand, and he keeps this check. But alas, it's of no use, because after king f1, you are simply out of any checks. Yeah, because you cannot, if you give a check, he can simply capture the rook, and you cannot prevent this pawn from queening. So once again, white wins. After queening, he gets a superior piece, and he can use it to win against the king and the rook. So that's it, guys, for today, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I gave you a couple of very simple examples in order to make you understand this concept of how the position affects the relative strength of pieces. In case you have any doubts, please post in the comments, or if you want more videos like this on what content you actually expect from me, please post it all in the comments so that I can create such videos in the future and we could get along together. Thanks a lot. It's Vishnu signing off. And if you like my video, give a thumbs up and do subscribe to my channel. Take care of yourself. Bye. It's Vishnu again, signing off. Thank you.